This is a new edition of Head On here on Shaw TV. I'm your host, Ian Holmes. Head On expanded from 15 minutes to half an hour to get more in depth on the issues that really matter here on Mid-Vancouver Island. And a big time issue is the fact that the medicinal marijuana industry, a big shift going from residential homegrown units now to zoned in industrial zones, and it's handled by local municipalities. And we'll talk about the differences that will bring, quite a big change. And Felipe Lucas from Tilray, Vice President of Tilray, is here to discuss a little bit about the impacts, the full circle of the medicinal marijuana industry and what impact that will have on Nanaimo. Felipe, thanks for coming in. I really appreciate it.
It's absolutely my pleasure. It's good to be here, Ian.
This really is a big change, shifting now to more of an industrial, commercial scale operation. We'll get to that in a second, but just talk about the industry in general. This is a relatively new industry, isn't it, Philippe, as medicinal marijuana does cure quite a few ailments for people?
Well, you know, medical cannabis has been used for about 5,000 years of recorded use that we know of, so certainly medical marijuana is not a new industry, but what's going on here in Canada, the licensing of large-scale producers to supply patients, is really unique. There's nothing like it going on anywhere in the world, and it's really about taking this industry out of the shadows and bringing it into the light, and Tilray is really proud and happy to be part of it.
So the benefits that you know of medicinal marijuana, Philippe, what really does this, what capacity health-wise does this really assist people's lives?
Well, I personally have been a medical cannabis patient since 1995. My condition is hepatitis C. I got it through tainted blood when I was 12 years old in Ontario. And for me, it really helped me stay away from alcohol and tobacco, which were harming my liver. And then it also helped with inflammation, localized pain, and to deal with nausea and loss of appetite. But the fact is that medical cannabis helps a number of different conditions. The primary patient group that we see are people suffering from chronic pain. We've also got a lot of people with gastrointestinal disorders, folks who are using it for cancer chemotherapy to help stay on their HIV/AIDS or medications, or their Hep C medications. And there's some really cutting-edge research going on right now looking at the use of cannabis and cannabinoids to treat cancer, because cannabinoids are powerful anti-carcinogens and anti-tumorific agents, and also for the treatment of dementia and Alzheimer's. So it's really an amazing and expanding field, and despite prohibition really restricting research for really decades, it's really emerging right now, and most major pharmaceutical companies are really interested in this substance.
What a complete 180 from what we've seen from, I guess, upwards of 80, 100 years ago, this being a major hallucinogenic that could ruin your life, to now we're seeing some beneficial uses for a natural substance. Philippe, it must be interesting, even just in the span of our lifetime, to see how this has really evolved into a real asset, as opposed to what many people feel is a social detriment. There certainly are some concerns. It is a mind-altering substance, but there is something to be gained here, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's a matter of coming full circles. 100 years ago, most major medical preparations, oils, tinctures, ointments, etc., many of them contain cannabis. And so it's interesting that they were part of our pharmacopoeia. They were part of what doctors' tools, or part of the tools that doctors had at their disposal until, well, in Canada 1923 and in the U.S. 1936 when they were made illegal. And now we're just starting to reappreciate and rediscover the potential of cannabis and cannabinoids. And of course, compared to a lot of our commonly used pharmaceutical drugs, both prescription and over-the-counters, it is relatively and comparatively safer. That being said, it's not an altogether benign substance, and certainly people should be speaking with their physician if they intend to use cannabis as a medicine.
And the fact that Health Canada has recognized this as a medicinal agent in 2001 obviously took quite a bit of time. Since then, over the past, 13 years or so here in Canada, Philippe, what have you seen in terms of the Government of Canada's relationship to marijuana? We've gotten approved to the medicinal stage. Where's it going from here?
Well, I think at first it was a bit of a reluctant relationship. We have a medical marijuana program in Canada because a couple of patients, Terry Parker and Jim Wakeford, sued the government for access to medical cannabis. They had been arrested, or their suppliers had been arrested, and they wanted to make sure that they had legal access. Jim Wakeford suffered from HIV/AIDS, and Terry Parker suffered from MS, and so for them, this was a matter of really life and death to be able to have access to these medicines. Since then, however, we've seen this program grow, and so that right now there's about 50,000 Canadians that have federal authorization to use cannabis. But that's really a drop in the bucket, because government-sponsored research suggests that there are between 500,000 and 1 million Canadians who claim to be using cannabis for medical purposes. So that's literally 2 to 4% of the adult population. So it's a substance that's being widely used right now, but unfortunately, under the old system, most medical cannabis patients weren't protected from arrest and prosecution. We hope that's going to change under the new system.
Now, you mentioned there's quite a bit of research going on in the connection and how it can help cancers and such. Is this some positive early reviews on this kind of research? Where's that going? Is there anything tangible in the connection between marijuana and assisting cancer patients?
Well, it was interesting, because the first study that I'm aware of cannabis as a treatment for cancer, cannabinoids as a treatment for cancer, dates back to the early 70s, right before Richard Nixon declared basically a war on drugs, and cannabis became even more illegal, despite the fact that during the 70s in the U.S. there was a shift towards decriminalization, and in Canada we've played around with the idea of decriminalization for some time. But that legal status and the legal nature of cannabis made it very difficult for researchers to go ahead and do research. They couldn't access a source of cannabis to do the kind of research that they needed to do. And so most of the studies that have been done so far on cannabis as a cancer treatment have been done what we called in vivo or in vitro. They're either test tube research or they're research on animals. But over the last 10 years or so, we've been starting to see more applications, the more clinical style trials, which are very exciting. And what I can tell you is that I've seen some amazing research presentations where people have done direct injection of cannabinoids into tumor sites, and you can visibly see over a period of time the disappearance of those tumors. And so, I'm at an age, I'm 44 years old, where my generation's starting to be affected by cancer, and I've seen my parents' generation be decimated by cancer. I think that it's one of the great tragedies of cannabis prohibition is that it's slowed down and stymied this research into potential cancer treatment. I really hope that the next 10 or 15 years we're going to see the kind of treatment that'll be less toxic and more effective than the currently available treatments for cancer.
Well, that's very fascinating stuff. Much more with Philippe Lucas of Tilray. We'll get into the medicinal marijuana facility coming up in a matter of days, in fact, in the Duke Point area right after this break. More on Head On after this.